I want you guys to look at this picture real fast and just think about like the implications of the picture itself. This was taken in 1998 in the NBA Finals. This is Jordan's last shot. At the time, it was his last shot. And he hit the game winner. Obviously, this is, growing up loving sports, this is kind of the dream scenario. You're in the NBA Finals. You need a shot to win the entire championship. You give it to the best player. He puts up a jumper and game over. 6 seconds left. I was just telling Professor Simon that this is probably my favorite picture ever. The normal picture is all in color, but this edit is probably my favorite thing ever. It represents to me victory. It represents struggle, represents sacrifice. It's that sense of overcoming an obstacle that as students and as people in general, everybody has to go through at some point in their life, like we just saw with Jonathan. But when I was doing research on struggle in sports, most of what came up was just crisis. There were so many different scenarios where something went wrong that wasn't even related to basketball. I remember the first PR class I ever took at Biola was a crisis PR class, and I had no idea what PR was. I just decided to take the class because, let's give it a shot. The whole pre-med thing wasn't working out, and I loved it. I was hooked. I love the idea of still being able to help people, still being able to communicate what I needed to communicate, and do so in a setting where people are, they're receiving more than just surface level communication. It's understanding an issue, it's fixing an issue, and it's overcoming that adversity. So today I want to talk about a crisis within a crisis. And basically the idea behind this is that even within a crisis itself, the way somebody can go about a crisis can become a crisis. First I want to define what is a crisis. According to Oxford Dictionary, these are the 3 definitions it gives. The most intriguing one is the last one. It actually says a turning point of a disease when an important change takes place, indicating either recovery or death. This last part right here is kind of the focus of what I wanted to do in this presentation. It's that sense of how you handle the crisis itself can determine whether you're going to go to recovery or whether you're going to go to death. It just depends on what you do in regards to it. So, obviously talking about sports organizations, the NFL is probably the poster child for how not to handle a crisis. And they deal with a crisis every day. Most of it comes because of low-income family backgrounds with the players, gang ties with players. Some of it even comes from the fact that players are wealthy and they've been given everything their entire lives. And when something comes up that they can't overcome, they expect it to be given. I could have named 100 crises going back all the way to O.J. Simpson, but I chose to do more recent ones. So the first thing I want to talk about is the New England Patriots. So the New England Patriots have been scrutinized since I even started watching football, which was in 2004 when they actually beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And that's where the first kind of incident happened. The whole Spygate scandal happened throughout the 2003-2004 season. Basically, they were recording teams' plays, which is not bad, but if you do it behind the team and you're actually getting the plays they're going to do next, it's cheating. It wasn't against the rules, but it was cheating. It's bending the rules that they have. The NFL did absolutely nothing. They somewhat addressed the issue, but they didn't hit them with any penalties because it wasn't against the rules. They shifted the blame to the Patriots, and though they were found guilty, the most that happened was a few fines. The fines are significant as far as numbers go. I think they were fined like $1 or $2 million. But still, their championship wasn't taken away from them, their season wasn't taken away from them, and all the awards they won that season weren't taken away from them. This happened last year. It was Deflategate. They were accused of deflating footballs so that Tom Brady can fit them in his hand better. This one with the NFL, they tried doing more, but they did it in a way that wasn't involving the public that were involved. They just slapped them slapped Tom Brady with a suspension. This suspension is actually pending appeal right now, and it's supposed to go to the Supreme Court, and they're going to talk about why or why not he should be suspended. So technically, he's not even suspended yet. He can't serve his suspension until his appeal goes through. But still, the NFL didn't really do much. They gave him a 4-game ban for the quarterback, did nothing to the team, and they took away their draft picks. And people think that it's this big thing that the NFL did, but in reality, it was the NFL shifting the blame to the Patriots. At the end of the day, the way they communicated with the publics was by simply letting the Patriots do it themselves. Which in turn, because the Patriots don't want to talk about something that happened like this, It's just not talked about. The only time you hear about Deflategate is when it's either going back to court or Tom Brady is suing the NFL. Now, the biggest issue that has surrounded the NFL since the birth of the NFL has been domestic violence. Again, talking about O.J. Simpson and that murder trial and things like that, that was the biggest one, but I want to talk about two more recent ones just because of kind of that modern era of public relations where you involve things like social media and the internet. So the Ray Rice scandal. On February 15, 2015, Ray Rice and his then fiancée, Janae Palmer, they're now married, were arrested on minor assault cases. 4 days later, TMZ released a video of Rice hitting Palmer earlier that year and dragging her out of the elevator. This is a picture of the video. The NFL did nothing until July 24th. So put that in perspective for a second. 6 months after this video is released, everybody has access to the video. Everybody's seen the video. 6 months after, then the NFL reacts to it. They never addressed the media. All they did was suspend him for 2 games without pay. On August 28th, the NFL introduced a new domestic violence policy that basically said that any player who's found guilty of a domestic violence case on first offense will receive a 6-game suspension from the season. However, Ray Rice didn't see the suspension because it happened after his hearing and his ruling. Janae Palmer also didn't press charges, which kind of helped in their process as far as what they were going to deem fit. But still, the NFL didn't really do anything. They suspended him for 2 games, shifted the blame, water under the bridge, and that was it. Now the Ravens, the team that Ray Rice was playing for at the time, they released Ray Rice, and they kind of cut ties with him, saying that somebody like that in the organization doesn't have a place. But again, the NFL didn't do much, and still to this day refuse to even address the issue. The Adrian Peterson case, sorry if the graphics are a little violent, but the Adrian Peterson case, on May 18, 2015, Adrian Peterson is accused of abusing his son. This one was interesting because it kind of plays into the idea of culture and diversity and how the differences in culture kind of dictate what we see things as. In this case, they saw it, or Adrian Peterson was claiming that he was just disciplining his child. The Vikings agreed, but the NFL took no action. And this is right before they announced the new policy on domestic violence. The NFL took no action because the NFL said that it wasn't their problem, that it was the Vikings' problem. When they were asked about it in the media, Roger Goodell said he couldn't make a comment about something that wasn't his problem. The quote is somewhere along the lines of that. It was just very paraphrased. But basically, they shifted the blame to the Vikings and let them take the responsibility for what Adrian Peterson had done. Now shifting gears to the NBA. So again, every sports organization has crisis right and left. They happen every season. It can be something as small as, like the Clippers have 2 of them. One, you can see something as small as, hitting an equipment manager, or something as big as a racist slur. So for the Clippers, that's actually what I want to talk about. The first thing is Donald Sterling case. Donald Sterling was the owner of the Clippers, and he was basically recorded against his own will, without even knowing he was being recorded. And he was just saying racist things. He was saying racist slurs. He alluded to the fact that he did not like black people, and he was saying this to his mistress, who was black. His wife is actually the one who pressed charges against him, which is why the NBA found out about it in the first place. But the NBA took action immediately. 4 days later, they banned Sterling for life for the NBA and forced him to sell the team. And then Adam Silver, who was just introduced as the commissioner 2 months before, came out and started talking about the issue of racism in sports and why this happens. He apologized because even though he did not agree with what Sterling did and he didn't do it, he recognized that Sterling is a representation of what the NBA is because he's an owner. He is a primary stakeholder. So again, he sold the Clippers to Steve Ballmer, and even though he made $1 billion off of it and he sued the NBA said that he can make all the money he wants, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have grounds in an organization that doesn't stand against racism. The Blake Griffin incident, this happened this year. This was 2 months after I no longer worked at the Clippers, and I actually knew the equipment manager that Blake Griffin hit. Basically, they got into an argument, they got into a scuffle about undisclosed reasons, and Blake Griffin hit him. And he hit him so hard that he broke his hand. Ultimately, the Clippers suspended Griffin for 4 games without pay, resulting in nearly $1 million loss. But what the NBA did, which I found really intriguing, is that they did the same thing the NFL did with the domestic violence case, but it's because they understood how minor of a case it was compared to something like hitting your child. The official statement from the NBA said that they were working with the Clippers and they were going to let the Clippers take reins. However, if they deemed that the Clippers did not give enough suspension, that they would take actions in their own hands. And they apologized for the conduct of the athletes because, again, the athletes represent the organization as a whole. And probably the biggest scandal in recent basketball, probably in the history of basketball, is the Tim Donaghy case. In 2007, Tim Donaghy was accused by the FBI of fixing games or predicting winners for James Bautista, who was like a gang lord, in exchange for undisclosed amounts of money. And the NBA learns about the incident on June 20, 2007. Investigations using Donaghy pleads guilty to the charges. This was a little more interesting because in 2007, social media wasn't really present the way it is now. But the NBA actually took a really big hit for this because of what happened in the next year. In 2008, Donaghy claims in open court, under oath, that the NBA officials told him to manipulate games in order to boost sales, apart from just the money he was receiving from James Bautista. Now, at the time, all you had was print and TV. There really was no internet presence as far as public relations goes. So Commissioner Stern addressed the media immediately, and he said that though he recognizes that it's not a perfect league, to his knowledge, there are no officials who did this. And if there are NBA officials, they'll be excommunicated immediately. He took a lot of fire for this, and even in the last 7 years of his standing as commissioner of the NBA, fans really didn't like him because of the accusations that were being made against him. However, what the NBA as a whole did was they hired a senior VP of referee operations, and actually the person that they hired, he was a general in the U.S. military. And the reason they hired him is because they knew he stood for integrity. And what he does is he overlooks every single call that happens in the NBA. As of recently, the NBA this season, every single time there's a call in question, they post the video of the foul or whatever it may be, or the no call, on Twitter, and they say, according to our rules in this section of the handbook, this should have been called the foul. And we apologize for the mistakes of our referees. Even it happened this last week when James Harden hit a game winner over the Clippers, or sorry, not over the Clippers. Goal over Golden State, sorry. He hit a turnaround jumper, but he pushed off. It was very, very evident that he pushed off. But at the time, it's a difficult call because of where you're standing as a ref, just flow of the game. The NBA that night announced that there should have been a foul called on James Harden. The shot shouldn't have counted. And it's more vulnerability and transparency that the NBA was trying to portray rather than kind of hiding things in-house and letting their officials do what they do. I have seen only one case where a referee was suspended because there were too many missed calls. It actually happened with Joey Crawford, who's one of the longest-standing referees in the NBA. He had a history of not getting along with the San Antonio Spurs. So there was a game where there was a few bad calls, and the next game there was a few more bad calls. So the NBA investigated it. They said that he wasn't purposely not giving team calls, but because of the continuous bad calls that were happening, they actually suspended him for the rest of the series. And he was able to he was able to ref the next series, but they actually placed him with a different team just in case there was the possibility of bias there. So to me, this is really just a question of ethics. The NFL, I listed all these things, just things that they don't do. Basically, the NFL is perceived as a very unethical league because of the amount of scrutiny they go through and their refusal to really address the issue. When it comes to ethical public relations, at least of what I've learned at Biola, when it comes to ethical public relations, one of the absolute biggest things is being transparent. It's letting people see what we're all about. If you're taking care of yourself as a public, but you're not taking care of your fans, you're not taking care of your publics. In the NBA's case, they do the complete opposite. They're transparent. They're willing to talk to people. They actually listen to their publics. The NBA is now putting logos on their jerseys starting in 2 years. But one of the things they said was this is going to happen, but they asked fans, how do you want this to happen? Where do you want the logos to go? Where do we stand on how big the logos can be? And they're really just willing to listen to people. Which brings me back to this. doing research on sports is really hard because this is what we see in sports. This is what we care about. Regardless of what, I mean, Jordan had a gambling problem his entire career in the NBA. But regardless of what he did off the court, on the court, he did this. And this kind of brings me to where I'm at right now. I'm engaged. I'm getting married in November. I don't have a real job lined up. I'm kind of in between struggling what I actually want to do in PR, whether that's crisis communication, whether that's social media. But all these obstacles mean nothing to me if I don't have this moment. And I kind of get lost in the moment, and what I don't realize is that there's so much behind it that needs to happen, so much behind it that needs to be taken care of in order for a moment like this to happen. So instead of being like the NFL, instead of kind of putting everything aside and blaming other people, you know, I need to be like the NBA. I need to realize that transparency needs to happen, that I need to be open with God. I need to tell him, like, listen, this is what I'm struggling with, and I have no idea how to do it. I need to accept the help, which is one of the biggest, or one of the hardest things for me to do, is accept help when it comes to looking for a job. I need to accept that help. I need to realize that though I want to be the PR director for FIFA or the NBA or something like that, I got to start off working 80 hours a week and making $20,000 a year. So I guess my challenge to you guys who are sitting in here, especially us three or you three who are graduating, and Jake who's graduating, is to think about moments like this, but just remember that everything that comes behind it is necessary in order for this to happen. So I want to thank you guys for coming out and open the floor for questions.